They took us downstairs, stood us up against the wall, threatened to shoot us. We were all in civilian clothing. We all had false papers, which they took off us. And they were going to shoot us as escapers, evaders, whatever. And saboteurs, they called us saboteurs. And one of the chaps pulled out his dog tags, as they call them, his RAF identification tags, and said, "We're RAF, you see, the three of us." So they didn't shoot us then. They said, "Oh, well, we'll take you down for interrogation." So they marched us down, and Dédé as well, down to Saint-Jean, where we were interrogated very roughly. We were banged about and told not to tell lies and so on and so forth. Then we were shoved into prison in Bayonne, and we were kept apart. I was in solitary confinement for about 4 months. How I kept my sanity, I don't know, but I did. And we were nearly starved. They just about kept us alive. I remember we used to have soup once a day, and that was all the main meal. We had coffee in the morning, coffee at night, and soup at midday, and that was it. That was all you got. Sundays, I think we had a little bit of meat in the soup and a bit of bread. But most of the time we were just thought of nothing but food. And of course we were taken out of the prison, sometimes in the middle of the night, and interrogated by the Abwehr, not the Gestapo, the Abwehr, which was the German intelligence, a part of the army. And we were very roughly treated. I was beaten up a couple of times.
He was interrogated for over 100 days, and he did see Dédé at Bordeaux, where they had been taken to a prison, and she looked at him and nodded. He had a rather bruised face by this time.
She was on the station and she saw my black eye and she sort of did this, stuck her finger up, said, "Keep your pecker up," sort of thing. She was marvellous, absolutely. She didn't give a damn for the Germans. She treated them like dirt. She just hated them. Anyway, we had a bad period in Bordeaux, in prison there. It was just the opposite. Instead of being in solitary, we were shoved in a cell with about 8 people, which should have only had 2 in. We slept on the floor. There was rats and mice and things, and it was horrible. And the smell was disgusting. I've an idea they put us in there. They probably had somebody in who was a stooge and tried to sound us out and get information from us. It was all about the Comet line, which I knew very little about. I was only with them for a couple of days, maybe a week altogether. And of course, all the names they used were false ones. Dédé wasn't her proper name, and Nadine, that was a false name. I didn't see Nadine, but there was some people in Paris I met, and they had nicknames. They all used these nicknames, code names.
Monsieur de Jong came and he asked me, "Do you want to work with me? Because I am a headmaster and I have not many time to work for the register." And I said, "Of course," I was delighted. Because for my father, I had to be courier international, but the chief of my father said, no woman, it's too dangerous for me. And so Monsieur de Jong asked me, so I say, "Oh yes, of course." And my parents agree. So since that time, I begin to work for Monsieur de Jong, first in Brussels, to change the place of the soldier, to look for clothes, shoes, food.
So we hadn't very much to give away, but they were very intent on finding out where I'd stopped in Brussels. Stupidly, I'd kept the address in a pocket in my uniform, and they found that. And poor old Morris was arrested and sent to Germany, and the family were arrested too. I found that out later. At the time, I didn't know anything about it. Several people were caught and shot and imprisoned. The women were in prison, the men were shot. The whole thing sort of came to a shuddering halt, and then they picked up again and carried on. They kept going as long as they could, but they got into the organisation, and obviously they got people to talk. They tortured people, and some could stand it and some couldn't, and they eventually caught up with a lot of people.
Are German on each side of the stair with gun, and they say, hands up, they say in English, hands up, or we try. So I quickly think they will not shoot because they want to know something. But I never never. I could not do that. I smile, of course, and I try to go that way. But there is a German in the way there. He said to me, that's funny, he said to me, take only a few things, only for a few days. Toothbrush and pyjama, and it's not. But I thought it's not, I know. The man who denounced me denounced more than 100 people. And when he was arrested, he was not tortured, but he was weak, I suppose. So he spoke. And also, he has a list of members hidden somewhere, and he gave the place to the German. So, for me, he's a weak, poor man. I cannot understand how he can do that. So maybe it's a double agent. Maybe it's only a poor man, I don't know.
Nadine had a terrible time, but she came through it. She was in several very bad prisons. And
Then the big chief of the Geheimfeldpolizei, of the police, came in and said, the girl speaks. No, she will not say nothing. And then the chief came to me and said, I admire you. And he said to the other in German, but I understand, he said to the German, talk, 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 talk. If the girl will not speak, send it back. Other people will speak. And that finished like that. So I was lucky.
they took us back to Bayonne for another spell of solitary and questioning, and eventually they took us up to Paris. The chap in charge of the cells was an ex-Russian front soldier, a German soldier, and he found out I was a RAF flyer, and he hadn't known that. He thought I was a civilian, and his whole attitude to me changed. And the next day I got extra food, 2 English books he'd found somewhere, and his attitude to me was a friend, more like a friend. We were fellow combatants, and he respected me for that, because a lot of the people he had were civilians and they were saboteurs, and he hated their guts. But once he found out I was in the RAF, I was all right. He looked after me. It was amazing. I got extra food, which of course was the main thing. All you thought about was food all the time. You used to be waiting at the, leaning up against the door, waiting for them to bring the food in. You could think of nothing else.
Comet Line itself lost 216 members shot or otherwise killed. Over 1,000 of them were in camps, prisons, at the time of the liberation. They saved over 800 Allied aircrew, as well as a number of civilian people as well.
I came back the long way, or I didn't come back. I was the one that didn't get away. Oh dear.
De Jong, the Germans didn't accept that such a young woman could be the head of a line of people doing this work. And she was sent to a concentration camp, and she swapped places with a dead person and lost herself in the crowd at the concentration camp. She survived, finished her nurse's training, went out to the Belgian Congo and then to Senegal and to Ethiopia nursing lepers. And she spent 30 years of her life doing that. And for her work during the war and for her nursing of lepers, the King of the Belgians created her a countess.
I went back in 1946. I wanted to see Maurice and I found out he'd been caught and shot. But I did see the rest of the family, but I was so shaken I didn't want to go back again. Never went back to see them. They were very sad and shaken. Even the old lady had been put in prison, I remember that. I felt terrible about that. It was through helping me that they were taken. Of course they said, be very careful what you say, and I said, oh yes, I wouldn't say anything, but it's easy to say, but it's not easy to do, you know. I made several mistakes and gave things away. I always regret that. Incredible people, what they sacrificed.